Hello, this is SK Williams, and this is the first sort of episode of Walk and Talk with SK Williams. Animated, of course. I say sort of because it's actually a prototype. I intend on doing 3 of these before committing to the final version of the Walk and Talk. But, for now, this is going to be me playing with the idea. It's not entirely a new idea, really. I've done other videos where you see me walking in through an animated background and presented commentary, but in those I actually took test animation when I was learning how to animate and simply overlaid a commentary that I did later on them if they were roughly the same length and fidgeted a bit with it. This is different in that it was designed for the commentary. Although I'm often not going to animate the mouth movement because it actually takes too much memory space, and while I would be willing to do it on other projects, for this one I'm not. However, I would like to get the format properly done and learn how specifically I want this series to go. I'm trying to get back into animation now that I realize that I probably won't get sued for producing it. And this is also a good way for me to get back into more common videos. I intend on putting some more videos out with the Bible, and I intend on finally releasing my college series later on. But with this, most of it's going to be me talking into a microphone and then overlaying it onto me walking through animated backgrounds. What I'm actually going to do is, once I get everything sorted out in my head about how it will work, do a lot of me walking animations of various lengths through various different sceneries, and then overlay various commentaries on them. So, while I don't count this one as part of the series proper, it is very obviously part of that series of Walk and Talk. It's a prototype, if you will. It's episode 0, if you will. So I hope you will accompany me while I discuss 2020. 2020 is a seminal year in the history of humanity, I believe. It is one of the most important years humanity has ever seen. We've had the pandemic, but it was a very strange pandemic in which the entire world shut down, and not incidentally. The entire world came together to shut down. Terrorists who had been bombing Western powers agreed with those Western powers to lay down their arms to lock down, and that alone is an impressive feat. But now there are questions on whether or not this was an appropriate response to the pandemic. Many believe that it was an overreaction, while others have engaged in conspiratorial thinking about possible motives behind the shutdown. What is interesting about this entire situation is that even if it is a conspiracy and not a real pandemic, or the other way around, even if it is a real pandemic and not a conspiracy, we are going to notice things that will affect the future in a grand scale. Things that won't readily go back to normal. The economy has now been cratered, for example, creating what could be one of the worst depressions in history. I'm not going to say it definitely will be one of the worst in history, but there will be a depression as a result of this due to the steep and understandable economic collapse. The way people interact with each other might change. People are already wearing masks when they go into public. As you can see, I'm walking through a desert, so there's no one around, so I don't need a mask. But people are distancing. And this may remain a part of how people behave for years. I'm not saying that they will remain 6 feet apart and take the extremes, but we may see the end of friendly handshakes or a pat on the back. People may learn to be a little more cautious and more distancing. In fact, there is a campaign to abolish the handshake. People are talking about reshaping society to be more efficient in the future, not only to take care of pandemics but other problems. We have seen riots. We have seen a sharp increase in mental health problems, which I find hilarious because the way I live normally was not truly affected by the pandemic. I've had more interaction now since the pandemic started because of various circumstances in my life, but being disabled and unable to go into the sun, I kind of sort of stay home anyway most of the time. Although, maybe people will now understand why I have a bit of an off personality. I don't have great social skills because I don't engage in society much. I can't drive, I'm legally blind, and I can't stay in the sun for prolonged periods, so there you go. But those mental health issues, as well as the fear of the pandemic and how it will affect society, especially the young and impressionable, may have a profound impact on what's going to happen in the future. And I don't really know if I can predict the outcome. One of the things that many of you probably won't know is that I'm actually rather good at predicting the future, short term. This isn't because of any sort of special psychic power or connection with God or anything, it's just looking at the patterns of history and probability. I can usually predict within a reasonable amount of accuracy what will happen. I am surprised sometimes and I am wrong sometimes, but I can predict with reasonable certainty. But that's not true anymore. I cannot even begin to tell you how the US election will shape up. I cannot begin to tell you what the economy will look like next year or even next week. I can't begin to tell you what society is going to look like in 5 minutes, much less next year, and usually that's what I was very good at. It's what I do for a living. I'm an analyst, that's what I do. But this is so unprecedented in the history of mankind, so unusual, that I simply don't know what will happen next. I can make educated guesses, and I will in the future, but I don't know. It doesn't really frighten me that I don't know. In fact, it excites me. It's rather like watching a movie and being taken by surprise that they took in a different direction than you predicted. Usually I'm better at predicting how movies will play out than real life. Even though I'm fairly good at predicting real life general behaviors in society, I'm much better at movies, but sometimes the movies will throw you a curveball you don't expect, and sometimes the whole movie will turn out differently. It's fun to watch those kind of movies. The ones that you think you know everything that's going to happen, and yet it doesn't just throw you one curve, it throws you a million. It's why I had fun watching The Rise of Skywalker. I admit that it is a bad movie. I admit that it is a terrible Star Wars movie. I admit that it doesn't make any sense, but I couldn't predict what was going to happen at all within the film, other than Rey will survive and be the new God Empress because she is magnificent and perfect in every way. And I was right about that, but that goes without saying. I didn't know if Kylo would live or die. I didn't know if the Reylo ending would happen or if it would be something else. I didn't know how they would defeat the First Order, which I knew they would defeat, but I didn't know how. I had no idea what was going to happen when I went into that movie, and it was a bit exciting. And sometimes you think you know exactly what's going to happen, and you don't, and it's not just one thing, it's everything, and those are great films to watch. It's different when it's real life. You want some certainty to hold on to. Of course, I do have certainty to hold on to. I am a Christian, and I have my faith. Go ahead, militant atheists, mock me. Tell me I'm delusional, and that it's stupid, and that it's fake. It's served me well. And it's not like I'm telling you that you must be a Christian to have any degree of benefit. I personally believe that every religion, including the militant atheist religion that we're supposed to pretend is a mere lack of belief in a god, when it's clearly not, can serve certain functions. Although I do believe militant atheism and its parent religion, secular humanism, don't do quite as good a job as Christianity would. But that's for another video as to why. I do, however, know that leaning on ancient wisdom has always seen me through in life. I have always benefited from the wisdom that I have gained from my faith, a wisdom that I can deeply appreciate and deeply love. So even though I am facing uncertain times, I can lean upon it. And it's not just, I believe God exists and he'll take care of me, and leaving it at that. I know roughly how to respond to various situations thanks to that faith. Not perfectly, I'm terrible at social skills, but the Bible's writers expected you to have that instinctually simply because most people interact with people. I just don't. But it does help. It helps a great deal, and I highly recommend reading the Bible, at least for that portion, at least for that aspect of it, to learn wisdom. And you can get this from other sources. You can get this from Plato, or the Quran, or other sources, but there's no reason why you can't read them all. Granted, you can't read everything, but I do think the Bible is warranted enough to be one of those things you can universally recommend, whether you believe in it or not. And I do pity the modern society that tends to view the Bible as something that we must disparage if we do not praise, as if it is completely worthless unless it is entirely true and Christianity is entirely correct. I, as a Christian, do believe Christianity is entirely correct, but even if I were to become an atheist, I would not view the Bible as worthless. It's helped me too often, and it has been proven true to me too often, for reasons I might go into in the second of the 3 prototypes of this particular series, but for now, I'm telling you, tradition and the wisdom of the past can seem a light on the darkened path that is the future, especially in times where the sky itself is darkened with the darkest of dark clouds and in the blackest of pitch nights. The events, the affliction that has gripped the world, has managed to reshape everything so that we need that guidance. And I do not, for one, think rejecting it because it is old is a good course. For what is the benefit of the wisdom of the past, if not to help us create a better future? Turning to that future, though, we must face it. It will be upon us. It will come. The question is, what shall we make of that? I say we conquer our fears. We slay the dragon who holds yon princess captive, or ride the great dragon into victory, or become the great dragon in might and power. The choice is ours, of course. And all of these are allegories for our own actions. They could even all mean the same thing. But as I ask any who listen to me to think about what I have said, as rambling as it is, as this is unscripted, I do call us back to that ancient wisdom. The ancient wisdom of the Bible, of the Church Fathers, and of old philosophers and mystics, who can teach us perhaps, just perhaps, the way the world works at a fundamental level, on an intuitive level. And perhaps we can use that to chart our new direction. Well, I haven't much else to say, so I think I'll wrap up my walk and talk. I've been going about in circles anyway. So, I shall bid you adieu. a thank you, God bless, and goodbye.